Today's panel discussion is unique for Research in Action because we have several panelists who will be discussing AR and VR. Virtual reality and augmented reality offer the ability to see a reality that may not physically be there. This connection can increase engagement and provides a richer experience. While users can benefit from such advanced research, does the technology come with any ethical challenges, or do the benefits far outweigh any potential issues? So I would also like to add another little note. FAU currently has a Center for the Future of Mind. And if you go to fau.edu/future-mind, you'll find some other interesting events as it pertains to AI and ethics and other types of research that's going on in this field. There is a presentation that's going to be going on called How Human is Consciousness, New Perspectives from Computation and Physics. Dr. Susan Schneider, who's going to be on the panel today, can talk a little bit more about that. But I'm also going to let our panelists now come online and introduce themselves, and we'll get the panel started. Ladies and gentlemen, you can go ahead and unmute yourselves and show your video. If we could get started, maybe we'll go ahead and have Dr. Pados, if you want to go ahead and get started and introduce yourself to the crowd.
Yeah, thank you, Jenny. I'm Dimitrios Pados. I'm the director of the new FAU Center for Connected Autonomy and AI that is now home to 8 internationally renowned FAU senior researchers and faculty, and 15 students at all levels, from high school to undergraduate to graduate to PhD level, which is the majority. Our center activities are sponsored by federal sources competitively at a very high level, primarily the National Science Foundation and the Department of Defense, and locally by the Smith Family Foundation. Now, my own, let's say, personal research background and work is in autonomous machine-to-machine connectivity and team AI learning and operation with applications to connected cyber-physical systems.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Mehrdad?
So my name is Mehrdad Nojoumian, and I'm an associate professor in the College of Engineering and Computer Science, and I'm also the director of the Privacy, Security, and Trust in Autonomy Lab. So I will talk about the research during the panel.
Excellent. Thank you very much. It's good to call you Topher, Dr. Maraffi. Hope you're on mute.
Sorry, are we sharing our screen now, or are we doing that later?
You could do it later.
Okay. So my name is, I go by Topher Maraffi, and I teach in the Media Technology and Entertainment MFA program in the School of Communications and Multimedia Studies. And in that program, as well as in our undergrad courses for the film, video, and new media, we teach XR, AR, VR, games, and all of the other acronyms that we'll explain in a little while.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And last but not least, Susan.
Hello, everyone. Well, I'm really honored to be here with such a great crowd. I wish we were all in person. My name is Susan Schneider. I'm the recent NASA chair at NASA and the Library of Congress. And now I'm the new Dietrich chair here at FAU. And we, as you mentioned kindly, thank you. We just opened a new center at FAU to complement all this exciting work going on here, called the Center for the Future Mind. You can Google us and hit our website. I'm a philosopher as well as a scientist, and the task of the new center is to explore the ultimate questions about the future of the mind, particularly in relation to actually doing some of the scientific work and in really engaging with fundamental questions at the forefront of fields like artificial intelligence.
Excellent. So we have a wide variety of scientists here, and hopefully we'll have just a very engaging discussion about AR and VR. And of course, with that, let's ask the biggest question then of the panelists all together is, what really is AR and VR? What are the differences between the two? I guess let me go with Dr. Pados. You want to go ahead and get started for us, and then maybe perspectives from everybody else?
Sure. Yeah, it's actually lots of acronyms here, and maybe the highest level acronym is XR, stands for extended reality, and under this you can have VR, AR, MR, but we will get to that. The big thing here is the following. What is this all about at its core of it, right? It's just an interface. It's a machine-human interface, computer-human interface, if you like, that engages or attempts to engage all of our senses. Sight, for sure, sound, touch, smell, why not? I don't know about taste yet. We'll see about this. But it's basically an interface between machines and humans. Now, if you go down the classification system there, what we call VR is basically some sort of a complete immersion where you lose completely contact with the physical world. It's like a video game, if you like, or maybe like Star Trek Holodeck, for those of us that are old enough to maybe remember that thing, right? Susan? Yeah. So that's what it is pretty much. You can get to that, of course, and analyze that further. But what's interesting, at least from my perspective, or the perspective of the Center for Connected Autonomy and AI, is what we call AR or MR, maybe. AR stands for augmented reality. MR stands for mixed reality. This is basically where reality and the digital world get mixed up and even interact with each other. And this is where the future of extended reality is for me. We'll get to that later. This is where most of the applications are. And maybe this is where most of the questions actually arise regarding practices, even ethics.
So more broadly, XR rather than saying AR or VR, correct?
I think, Jenny, you are right. If you call everything XR, you are pretty much correct. And then you can maybe further classify down the tree there as VR, AR, or MS. Actually, for many people, MR is just AR version 2.0.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So mixed.
All these are new terms. They're still evolving. So, from a design standpoint, it's about space and experiencing a virtual space. And so, when you're in VR, it completely surrounds you, and it is, I think, moving towards almost like a theater of the future from an art standpoint, where you're actually interacting with life-size virtual characters in things like the Void's Star Wars experience. If you've ever gone to that, or some of the other games that are out there. And then the AR is with your cell phone, and it's basically a camera feed that you're putting different kinds of graphics on top of. And then mixed reality is when the system is actually mapping the 3D space so that it's actually mapping that in 3D so that it can actually place things behind a table, or a character can pop its head up from behind something in the camera feed because it knows where everything is in 3D space, and it can actually have a depth, what would be called Z depth in that space. And then there's other acronyms too. They call it spatial computing at the Magic Leap people that we've worked with. We have a bunch of Magic Leap headsets, and so they there's all these different terms, but they are evolving.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely, especially from an immersion standpoint, which kind of goes off in another direction. Mehrdad, what about you?
So I think the explanation was very comprehensive from Dimitrios and the other guests. So maybe we can move forward.
Absolutely, not a problem. And now that we've kind of had a broad discussion about XR and AR and VR underneath of all of that, what are these technologies already being used for, both in the AR and VR realm? Obviously, gaming is very popular, but the applications seem to be far more reaching than that. So, any thoughts on what it's being currently used for?
So I think beside the gaming, for sure, education is another one. So a lot of institutions have started to utilize it for education, specifically because it's not very costly and you can pretty much create, let's say, a virtual chemical lab so that the students can practice, mostly in poor areas or countries. So education has a lot of, applications, and of course, research. I will provide more clarification about that when we get to FAU involvement with VR.
Mhm.
But I can say gaming, education, and research are three, and of course others can add on top of that.
And interesting in the teaching environment, if you're in a chemistry lab in a virtual reality environment, can you light a Bunsen burner and do it wrong in a VR environment?
Of course, but at the same time, you might be able to play with dangerous chemicals in a safe place. So that's the good side of it.
Being able to burn everything down, that's awesome. But also doing it in a safe place. That's what we want.
Do it safely.
Exactly. Well, that's next. Go ahead.
Some of our projects are with the what I call edutainment, where they're educational, but they also use entertainment techniques to make the education more fun. We work with the Museum of Discovery and Science, mods downtown Fort Lauderdale, and teaching students how to make AR apps for the museum, and also researching new ways of showing museum exhibits and at historical sites. And one of the things that is central to that is these virtual docents and virtual tour guides that are 3D characters that use motion capture, and they greet you and they talk to you and interact with the people that are going to the museum.
Interesting. Very, very cool on that. So now that kind of leads to that adds the edutainment is what you called it, but it's all stemmed out of some kind of research, correct? So how are these technologies being researched today, and what are these technologies? How are they going to change our lives for the future? What are the benefits, and how will society benefit? I know it's kind of broad, several based questions, but would really like to see how like the research that we're doing here at FAU translates into societal benefit.
Well, I'll jump in here. I think they've already outlined, several potential benefits. Ranging from exciting video games to education, very immersive education that can actually increase somebody's empathy. For example, what about remembering Holocaust survivors, for instance, or you could actually feel what it's like to be Rosa Parks sitting on the back of the bus. We all work remotely now. Remote work could be seamless. You could actually have dinner with colleagues in a VR universe. So there's a lot of potential. For potential, I highly recommend reading Ray Kurzweil's depictions of the future. But as a futurist myself, I'm extremely worried about misuses of VR technologies, not so much by fellow scientists who are doing, research in the context of, simulating autonomous vehicles or whatnot, but more in terms of the surveillance economy for data that we have here. So, we're all familiar with Facebook taking our data, giving us very opaque user agreements. Well, all the apps are doing this. In fact, the economic model right now for, you know, the digital economy, this sort of online world that we're used to, is to make money by giving us free services, by selling our data or giving us a little, you know, bit of information that leads us to click in a certain direction and purchase a product. This is called surveillance capitalism. Okay. And if you think it's bad now, it can get even worse very quickly. You know, I don't even sort of know where to start, just to warn you. But right now, for example, Facebook has purchased and is very close to beta testing a wristband technology that detects motion initiation in the brain. Okay. So that will be unrolled in the context of VR. And what will happen is you'll think about moving your hand and your virtual hand on the screen will actually move. You can Google the technology. So it's an exciting technology in terms of the neuroscience. It was developed at Columbia University in the context of work by the person who created the Internet Explorer, who then got a PhD in neuroscience. But I worry it's also going to be deployed by Facebook. And of course, while our young children are out there playing their video games, their data will be tracked. Motion initiation in the brain. So what I like to tell people is today's data economy will be tomorrow's thought data economy. So I just think we need to be careful with some of these technologies and remember that there are nefarious corporate actors out there.
Yeah, and the most popular headset right now, you can hardly even get it, is the Oculus Quest 2, which is owned by Facebook, and you do have to the Oculus Quest 1 do not require you to sort of log in through Facebook, but Oculus Quest 2 does. And so they've sort of really coupled that with Facebook in a way that it hadn't been before. So that is definitely something to be consider. One of the things that we look at in our work with there's a lot of work that's being done for civil rights to experiences, or in my project, we're doing an XR experience of the first African-American town during the Civil War, with figures like Frederick Douglass and Harriet Tubman, and we're creating these characters with AI and other XR technologies, and so we have to consider closely representation of these different groups that you know we're not necessarily a part of. So we have to work with the town has the Gullah Geechee culture, which was the first freed enslaved Africans up along the eastern coast, and it still exists today. And we have to work with you know, representatives from that culture and performers from that culture to actually have African-American performers do the motion capture, so that, you know, we don't make this into some kind of 21st century blackface or minstrelsy. So we're very careful about how we represent figures, especially from different cultures and races.
Very good point. Very good point. And it's almost a brave new world, obviously, with the fact of that there's benefits of being able to have that data to improve our lives in terms of health, even being able to make larger data sets so that health outcomes could be improved. But likewise, it can also be used by the corporate actors, as Susan was talking about, for their own gain or for profit. Absolutely. But I'd like to try to talk about some of the other research that's going on here and some of the great benefits that might have. Maybe Mehrdad, would you like to share some?
Yeah, sure. Before I explain where we use virtual reality technology here at FAU, I see that there are lots of students in the room, so I provide a brief introduction as many of them may look for a fresh research topic in this domain. So we mainly use it for modern AI, and I explain what I mean by modern AI. It's really fair to say that a lot of, the AI today has reached a level of maturity, and a lot of, fundamental problems that was big issue in the last 4 decades have been resolved from planning, reasoning, knowledge representation, search, all the way to machine learning. So that, and evidence is that a majority of the papers in the classical AI today are related to applications. For instance, developing an AI system predicting that if a given image represents a cancerous image related to tumor or whatsoever. So that's a very good news. And you may ask if with this level of maturity, how come we still don't have self-driving cars on roads or fully autonomous drones delivering our packages, or we still don't have robotic system at home? The main reason is as soon as you connect AI or autonomy with humans and they start to interact, then 3 major lines of queries are going to be initiated and one major concern. So those lines of queries are, one is societal aspects of this marriage. So how we should trust AI, how would be our satisfaction or frustration, and all those things. And the second line of query is ethical aspects. So can we build an AI system to lie during negotiations, for instance? And the third line of query is related to legal issues. So if something bad happened after this marriage between AI and autonomy and humans, who is going to be responsible and who should be held accountable? So of course, in addition to this, we have cybersecurity concern. That's why a new area, trustworthy AI, was initiated. But in response to these 3 new lines of queries, 2 big associations in computer science community, AAAI and ACM, came together 4 years ago, and they established a new conference, AI, Ethics, and Society. So the major theme of this conference is to bring all social scientists, philosophers, psychologists, legal people to address problems related to modern AI. And the thing is, initial impression was that a lot of those problems might be able to be resolved just by adding some features to existing theoretical foundations. But very soon the community recognized that we need to fundamentally change some of these theoretical foundations to address legal issues, ethical issues, societal issues, or even cybersecurity issues. So along that, what we did here at FAU, we developed a realistic self-driving car simulators. Our major focus was to come up with a realistic self-driving simulator where people can practice and experience how a self-driving car is going to look like. So it's mainly related to trust between humans and self-driving cars. And what we did, we actually captured 360-degree videos from roads in South Florida, our campus, Boca Raton, Highway 95. And at the same time, we collected telemetric data, and then we incorporated those videos and telemetric data into a motion chair and also to a virtual reality headset. And we synchronized everything, and then we created one of the state-of-the-art simulator. If you look at the other self-driving cars at other institutions, you will see that the majority of those are not immersive. They use computer-generated videos or animated pictures or they sit human subjects in front of the, for instance, 3 largest screen. So, however, in our driving simulator, we can even expose our human subject to real accidents. So we can capture video from real car accident and bring that to our simulator and expose human subject to that to measure human factor and see how they are going to interact with AI or autonomy. So I share, if you don't mind, I just shared this one page. So this is the self-driving car simulator that we developed here at FAU. Again, the main purpose was to build a controller for autonomous vehicles so that they can be responsive to human emotion, trust, anxiety, fear, and all those things. So how to establish this trust at the beginning, sustain it over time, and rebuild it in the case of incidental failures. And again, one of the biggest reason that we achieved a lot of success on this project was this was the first technology with realistic videos of driving rather than animated or computer generated videos. So this shows that how virtual reality or augmented reality can provide a strong foundation for fundamental research in academia. And we filed, 2 patents. One just was issued related to the, problem that I mentioned. And I should proudly say that FAU has a very bold visibility in these tier 1 conferences. I have put 2 of the papers related to this research there. If anyone is interested to learn more about this VR technology that we developed here. And it's really amazing that FAU is working on these cutting edge projects in the AI community to address some of the problems related to modern AI. Mm-hmm. So again, for those students who look for problems, I can say that a lot of interesting problems in modern AI along those 3 lines of queries can be solved by developing these virtual reality technologies from ethical aspects or legal aspects. And if you have any interest, maybe this is a good path to pursue.
Excellent. Really appreciate that thorough review of the research, especially from the standpoint of it improving non-autonomous vehicle operations and having humans in the car. So that's a really important feature. Topher, I think you had said you had you were going to talk a little bit about the research you were doing. You had a slide.
Oh, yeah, I could just share my website and people can look at that.
And there was a question from the audience, by the way. It's how soon are we going to actually have a holodeck? Inquiring minds want to know.
I think that there is some things out there where they are trying to. I mentioned one of them, the void, which unfortunately COVID has kind of bankrupted. But it was the most cutting edge VR experience that you could do, and it actually did have smell. It didn't have taste, to my knowledge, but it did have smell. There was and the founder of that was actually a magician, and he implemented magic principles to create these illusions in this space. And so there was one for Ghostbusters where you shot at the big Stay Puft or the marshmallow guy, and you actually smelled marshmallows when when it was burning, or when you're in the Star Wars experience, you feel heat from lava on a particular planet, so and you smell sulfur. Mm-hmm. So there was a lot of illusionistic type of things being put into that to create these experiences. We're working more on in our Media Technology and Entertainment Lab, XR Lab. We're working on things, like I said, historical sites, and using AI, generative adversarial networks to create these deep fake level designs that we can then make into 3D characters that are extremely realistic for Frederick Douglass and other historical characters, and doing stuff with the Museum of Discovery and Science. We teach a course down there in the summer for high school students, but we also have our grad students working on things like an experience of going back in time to see a saber-toothed tiger that was in this area at one time. So there's a lot of different things that we are doing with VR and AR and mixed reality. This is actually mixed reality here with a sort of a murder mystery theater game for the Magic Leap headset. So there's a lot of stuff on here that and more stuff about the Mitchellville project, which is a NEH and Epic Games mega grant funded project for recreating this historical site. And this is actually an image that shows the differences between AR and mixed reality and virtual reality. So people can go on here and take a look at some of this to see what we're doing.
Topher, there was a question on, and I was gonna wait for the questions until the end, but this one came up. You had mentioned before about the Magic Leap headpieces, and cost obviously can always be a factor too. So is it something that with the pandemic were schools provided more technology in order to access some of the things that we're talking about?
Yeah, the costs are going down, and we've kind of moved we've moved a little bit away from the more expensive headsets like the Magic Leap to the more inexpensive VR headsets like the Oculus Quest, which is $300, which is a reasonable cost for schools to get them. I mean, the only problem is that they just don't have enough stock. We tried to buy a bunch of them and we couldn't. So they're being bought, and once the prices go down under $300, I think anyone can buy them.
Excellent, thank you. So to go along the lines of some of the benefits, obviously Mehrdad's research was a benefit to being able to ensure that the autonomous vehicles are operating with trust with human operators as well at the wheel. A lot of the excellent work for museums. There was another question too regarding starting a virtual exhibit, and if there are tools out there. We don't necessarily have to answer it live, but maybe there would be some resources, Topher, that you could provide later on if somebody wanted to create a virtual museum, how they would maybe go about doing that. I'd also like to kind of segue some of the questions into controversial issues. Obviously, we've touched on some of them. Susan, you've mentioned some of them about individuals or corporations wanting the information. Are there any other types of controversial issues regarding it from any of your perspectives as a panel that might be Susan's ready to go?
I'm ready to go. So I just to connect up with what Topher was talking about, he said that VR is the theater of the future, and I couldn't agree more. And it's all very exciting, but I wonder how far do we want to take it? So, with kids, for example, very interested in VR technology, I think as a philosopher, I want to call attention to asking what we value about reality versus being disconnected and living in an alternative world. And let me give you an example. That was just before our panel today. I was just like doing a Google search to see what's going on in the world of VR controversy, and this is from Reuters, and I'm going to quote them. It's just a quick quote. Wearing virtual reality goggles, Jang Ji-sung burst into tears as her 7-year-old daughter emerged from behind piles of wood in a neighborhood park, her playground, until she died from blood-related diseases 3 years ago. So this is in Korea. This happened in Korea, where a mom got reunited with her deceased daughter in virtual reality. And, you know, this seems like a Black Mirror episode, doesn't it? I mean, it could be beautiful, but could it also become a dystopia where people fail to stay connected with the real world and this interferes with the mourning process? I think we have deep societal issues here, and consider a child right now who might be addicted to video games. I can envision, oh, gee, they live in the house, you know, kids who would be extremely addicted to virtual reality, to the point of maybe you can imagine as a parent saying, we think you need to be connected to reality. And the child asking a very rich philosophical question, what is real? What does it matter if I'm living on a holodeck, if you will, or in a matrix, you know, living my world in VR versus living in the outside world? I am happier in VR. There's more pleasure. I can do more. So I think these are the kind of issues that we'll be facing as a society in the future. You know, the technology will grow and grow. It will get increasingly seamless. And so it'll be important for us as a society to separate out what we can do with our technology versus what we should do with our technology.
I think from my perspective, as Susan mentioned, those are very, very valid points. And addiction and sickness are two major concerns. And because the human body is very complicated, if you use these virtual reality headsets for a long time, then they may manipulate your sensation, the way that you perceive the environment in real world. So that's for sure one major concern, and addiction, as Susan mentioned. But on top of that, the other positive thing is if you bring kids to this virtual reality environment, you may help them to grow their creativity, to see things that you cannot really provide, especially for poor areas or poor countries where we don't have too many facilities. So, I mean, negative and positive going side by side. So it's the way that you use it. So it's mainly people or parents or whoever is using should be really careful. You can go to the extreme negative spectrum, or you can go to the extreme positive.
And staying maybe, guys, on the positive side of things, medicine is also a field that we project that can benefit a lot from advances in VR, MR. Think, for example, surgery simulation being done by doctors, right? So this concept of really immersive simulation of any environment is really, really important, especially in fields such as medicine, where you maybe just have one chance to get it right, right? You cannot train on the job. So this is something that we think can have an impact, actually.
Or even more so in the medical field, where using cadavers is becoming more and more of a problem, and also that the cadavers don't act like a real body, don't act like a functioning human body, that when you're doing surgery. So the benefits of actually having a robust VR environment for surgical practice is seen as a huge benefit for the field.
Exactly. And then from the operational point of view, having this immersive environment gives you the ability to have total remote control, if you like, of autonomous systems. So you can imagine yourself flying the F-16 of the Air Force somewhere, or anything else that you can think of. And no doubt, actually, the Department of Defense is behind lots of the funding that falls in this area right now, for a good reason.
I agree with I mean, there's definitely training aspects that are that you couldn't do otherwise. entertainment aspects where you experience something that's basically impossible in a way that you couldn't experience it through a screen in an immersive way. So I think that there is a lot of artistic and training benefits, but of course with children who would possibly be using headsets, there are issues. If you wear a headset for a long time, your eyes do begin to hurt. They're not the Magic Leap headsets and the Oculus headsets. They're not so high resolution that you're going to mistake it for being actually real. You know you're in virtual reality, you know you're experiencing it. But it does, if you wear them for a long time, you could find your eyes hurting. So I think, parents would need to regulate it so that that doesn't happen with their children.
Right, absolutely, absolutely. So we're about 45 minutes in, and there were a couple of other questions that were in the Q&A. One of them was, and maybe this is a question for Topher, somebody's asking regarding how does an individual get into more quote immersive art? Are there courses or college programs or books that somebody could either study up on it or learn about it?
Yeah, there are, and a lot goes into these experiences. It's not just coding. The coding is going to give you the interaction, but there's also a lot of art assets that go into it as well. Modeling of different kinds of 3D objects and animation and 360 environments that have to be created. So, some of these experiences are like a big budget movie in that when you get to the end of them, you see a list of credits of hundreds of people. So, it is actually a huge industry now. I saw the other day that it's a $160 billion industry. The games and VR is actually up in there as well. And that's 4 times the size of film. In fact, like the music streaming and streaming television and film all fit are less than the game industry right now in 2020. So it is a huge industry with a lot being done. And if you're interested in getting in it, there's a lot of different areas that you can get in it as, not just coding. Of course, they need coders, but they also need artists. They need designers and musicians, performers, so many things.
And it actually lends to another question, like for Mehrdad and Dimitrios, for the research that goes on, where you're using what I would consider assets. I know, Mehrdad, you had video of people driving to use in your simulators. Do you also utilize graphic designers in order to build out some of the things that you're doing, or do a lot of the engineering students who do the kind of research that you're doing, do they build it themselves?
So you can go either way. In our case, we captured everything automatically by videos. We didn't add any graphics to those videos because we wanted to make sure it's very realistic. But of course, in many other cases, if you like to build a virtual museum, you might be able to build it through graphics. And then you need to learn a little bit about Unity, which is a software system that we use in Oculus Rift. And then you can pretty much bring all your graphics or videos in that environment and incorporate it into virtual reality. So that's how we did it.
Excellent, excellent.
But in our case, it took us 3 years to do all of the simulators. So it was not that easy. Yeah, 4 people, 3 years.
Right. right? Well, and you're using full-on video, so it's a lot of bandwidth as well.
Yes, and since it was a self-driving car, we had to remove the driver from scene so that when you see it, you don't see any driver. You feel that you are inside the cabin and car is driving itself. So those are some of the complications that we faced.
Great. Just looking at some of the other questions here. So I think we answered the question regarding creating a virtual museum. So you could either do it in creating the asset, or you can actually film it in the way that you were talking about. So it's somebody that I think works at FAU. So regarding the Wimberley Library and the Library Davies. So I encourage you to reach out to us regarding that, and we can also send something out to you. Another question, interestingly enough, talks again about the ethics that we've already touched on numerous times in this panel discussion. And I think it's kind of the competition with other countries, right? So if some countries, companies or individuals are concerned with ethics, but others are not because of a competitive edge, how does the development of new technology universally agree upon in an ethical way? And so maybe Susan, you can touch on the universality of it, of whether or not it's a global thing or it's not. Maybe you can touch on that.
Sure. This comes up a lot in discussions of AI. So, we have to be ethical, and we can't expect authoritarian dictatorships like China to be following the same ethical guidelines that we follow. And that's really sad. And that fact may be used to kind of, how would I put it? I won't say raise the bar, lower the bar, maybe. I mean, to push forward our research in certain directions, but we have to really hold on to our values. And the fact that some other country doesn't, it's not relevant. But we have to maintain supremacy in AI and invest a lot of money and effort, because AI is the wave of the future. It's here, but it's going to be even more important in the future than it is now in domains like warfare, supercomputing, just everything under the sun, space. So we can't downplay the import of maintaining supremacy, being extremely on top of things in artificial intelligence.
Yeah, if Susan, fully agree. We don't want to change ourselves, right?
Yeah.
Our culture to accommodate a new technology coming in. We're not going to be the same anymore, right? The idea is to build on what we have, not change who we are to make room for something else. So to the extent that ethics, practices, regulations, laws even are part of a culture, that's it. I mean, this is a culture, that's how we operate, that's how we do it, right? And the question now is how we can best regulate, let's say, the industry that's coming out of this stream that we call VR, AR, MR. And I think from an engineer point of view, going back, to the step one of how we develop these things. If we go back to the origins, maybe, of every technology, let's say talking about VR and what Toffer was mentioning. VR came basically out of the video games industry, right? What did we do? How do we do there? How do we regulate that industry? Is there anything there that we can learn from as we build the next generation of fully immersive, blah, blah, blah? What advice can we get from people that faced it? We can go even further back. Talk about cinematography, the movie industry, right? How did we deal when that technology came up for the first time and the kids started watching TV or, that many hours a day? Things become, however, a little bit more tricky, I think, and questions are not so easy to answer when you get into this MR field, where you have the reality there and you have the digital part, and those two interact. And the human user may have some control over this interaction, or maybe not. What do you do there? You're absolutely right. You mentioned, for example, when you do Google search, right? You have some search results showing up to you. By whom and why, right? What algorithm exactly gave you options 1, 2, and 3 when you looked up for the news of the day about VR? And then, even more importantly, what did you show on the side of it as other digital information? Was it, what was the motivation behind that? Was it like an ad, maybe? Did you know that it was an ad?
Mm-hmm.
So when I'm in a mixed reality environment, how do I know what is coming to me as actual, honest information from the books, let's say, and what is coming to me because of other reasons? Let's leave it there. This is basic question that I'm sure we need to discuss in the future.
Well, I'm also curious too, and somebody asked this question, which is interesting because we're talking about not only the ethics of people using it for bad things or using it for good things. What about preventing bad things from happening? So one of the participants asked, what is the potential for identity theft and predators in VR, and how can those threats be alleviated? So do we have anything, because obviously that's more of a criminal justice type of a thing. And
it's
a
cybersecurity question, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, what happens if somebody, hijacks, takes over your Tesla in autonomous mode, right?
That's a good question, right?
Yeah. So that really comes back to the issue of cybersecurity, protecting access to the digital channel. And this is where everything now comes back together.
And I guess, and we're getting close to running out of time, but another one would have to do with another question that came up, because I think this is also a cybersecurity one, but maybe one that's involved a little bit more deeply than just a single actor, having to do with deep fake videos. And, this has kind of been a VR, MR, but also a little bit of AI. The question is, deep fake videos are being made where a person's face and voice can be imitated. How is the general public able to decipher between a real person's video and fake going forward, even if there's is there even a way for a common person to tell the difference?
I think at some point you won't be able to tell the difference, but you'll have to make that decision based on what you're looking at. But you're right, it is becoming so realistic that, I've seen some examples with, I think, Tom Cruise that looked exactly like him. But, that's kind of the nature of the sort of the digital world, is that you are going to have this continuous development towards this realism. And I don't know if you can really stop that, but people will have to make, I guess, a kind of digital literacy to understand that they'll have to take things with a grain of salt and really question some of the things that they're seeing. Yeah, it's a scary thing, especially with politics and stuff that you could get that coming up. And you will. I mean, it's almost there where that's going to start happening.
There've already been a lot of hearings in Congress about this. Politicians don't like it.
Yeah.
It can ruin a career overnight. So let the lawyers figure that one out, right? And the technical people who work on detection. But I'm confident that there'll be a lot of political attention on this issue as we move into the future.
So do we all feel, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say that there's another issue that I think is important, is diversity in who's creating these experiences. It's still in both engineering departments and in game companies and all of these different places that are making these experiences. You still don't have enough women. You still don't have enough people of color. It's still very much needs to have more diversity, and the more diverse people that are making these experiences, I think you're going to get more interesting experiences. From my standpoint of games, a lot of the games are just very similar, and they're boring after a while because they're all the same. And it's because of the people who are making them. So you need to get other people with different experiences and backgrounds making games and making VR experiences.
Absolutely. And final thoughts?
Oh, yeah. May I just make a plug for the library? Somebody brought up the libraries earlier, and I think it's important to remember that when things open up again, the Gruber Sandbox will be, which is actually physically part of the library, will be a place for the public to become aware of these issues and learn more about artificial intelligence. So stop in. When it's open, there will be a VR room. There is one actually at the library. I haven't seen it yet because I'm actually new to FAU myself, but there'll also be, robots at the sandbox, and there'll be people there talking about their research, and it'll be a place to just, even see a calendar of all the different events and learn about the different institutes at FAU campus and browse through books on these issues.
My final point is, I think VR and all these XR technology, as Dimitrios mentioned, are going to play a significant positive role in research, specifically the points that I mentioned about modern AI, those 3 lines of queries where you connect humans with AI. So humans are vulnerable, and I think this technology can provide a very great tools to address a lot of questions, ethical questions, legal questions. And from that perspective, I believe the research community will see this as an excellent opportunity to solve a long list of problems in modern AI. And of course, as Dimitrios mentioned, medicine is another one. I recently heard that a couple of hospitals started to train their medical students through VR rather than bringing a dead body and cut it and go through the body. So, which is less costly, more safe, and easier. So, but of course, I believe from education perspective, I see it very positive, but from entertainment and gaming, there are lots of negative things as well. So I would categorize that as the final points.
And as a closing point from me, Jenny, imagine the next generation of mixed reality Zoom calls, maybe, where everybody feels like you are together with Susan, maybe in her farmhouse there or something to that respect. That's another domain where VR can have an impact.
Yeah, absolutely. To
visit my
help it, and your peacock too, and help us feel all connected. Well, I want to thank the panel for joining today and having this lively discussion about AR, VR, and XR. And I want to thank all the participants today for listening in. Feel free to drop us questions if you have any, and I'd be happy to share them with the panelists. And have a safe rest of your Wednesday. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Everybody.